Notice, Joseph's 10 slightly older brothers are all out working, and Joseph is at home with his father. This snitch dreamer, who thinks himself better than us, prancing around in that coat, bringing bad reports back to Dad, then publicly boasting about dreams, fantasizing about us all licking his boots. Let's kill him and cast him into some pit. They couldn't wait to violently tear the tunic off Joseph, cast into a deep, dark, empty, waterless pit. Hey bros, I know we've all fantasized about killing Joseph, but selling him into Egyptian slavery is as good as death. So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the tunic in the blood. And they brought it to their father, and he recognized it and said, "It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Without doubt, Joseph is torn to pieces." Genesis 37 verse 12. Then his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." So he said to him, "Here I am." Then he said to him, "Please go and see if it is well with your brothers, and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me." So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. These verses are very illuminating of the earlier bad report given against the 4 sons of the concubines. Notice, Joseph's 10 slightly older brothers are all out working, tending the flock, and Joseph is at home with his father. Remember in Genesis 25, Jacob liked to dwell in tents, whilst his brother Esau was an outdoors man. Jacob's raising Joseph to be just like Papa. If Jacob was a better father, Joseph would have been out working with his brothers. In verse 13 it says Israel, not Jacob. Israel said to Joseph. This is one of the rare times the narrator, Moses, called him by his new name. The flocks are in the Shechem fields, the town the brothers had previously destroyed. They'd spent years in this region and knew the fields of this land well, and there was no one left distantly related who felt comfortable seeking vengeance against this powerful Semite family. Jacob specifically sends Joseph as an overlord to observe, then bring back word. He was not sent to assist with the work. The brothers had good reason to believe Joseph was Jacob's snitch. That's exactly what he was. But it's Jacob to blame, not Joseph. Moses often repeats this quaint writing style, where a caller seeks someone and the protagonist replies, "Here I am." Usually something dramatic is about to happen in the life of the protagonist once they utter the words, "Here I am." Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Esau, and Joseph all utter these words through the Genesis narrative. Do your own research on the drama in Genesis associated with the phrase, "Here I am." Perhaps most famously of all, in Exodus 3, Moses replies to the great I am in the burning bush calling with these same words, "Here I am." Verse 15. Now a certain man found him, and there he was, wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, "What are you seeking?" So he said, "I am seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks." And the man said, "They have departed from here. For I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. So the greatly loved son is sent from the father's house, from Hebron, meaning joining or alliance, to walk amongst his brothers in a place called Shechem, meaning shoulder. The son is guided by an unnamed helper, a certain man, with critical, accurate and specific knowledge, led Joseph on the right path to find his brethren in Dothan, a name meaning law. When Jesus was sent from his father's house to his brethren, he did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. He willingly left behind the glories of heaven, obedient to the Father. He came to earth, was led by the Holy Spirit, the often unnamed helper. And Jesus discovered his Jewish brethren, bound under the law, shouldering the burdens of the law and their sins. Verse 18. Now when they saw him afar off, Even before he came near, they conspired against him to kill him. Then they said to one another, "Look, this dreamer is coming. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams." They saw Mr. Big Shot in his uppity coat from afar. Joseph stood out like a sore thumb in his Armani suit on that country dirt road. They saw the coat, and their hatred instantly bubbled up like bile. Let's kill Papa's favourite little snitch. All the brothers present at that moment agreed to murder Joseph. This snitch dreamer, who thinks himself better than us, prancing around in that coat, bringing bad reports back to Dad, sitting at home doing nothing, whilst we do all the hard work. Then publicly boasting about dreams, fantasising about us all licking his boots. Let's kill him and cast him into some pit, a dry well. The name of Dothan has a secondary possible meaning, a place of wells. There were plenty of wells around Dothan to cast his lifeless body into. You can see in this account, it was Joseph's two dreams which had really sent them psychotic. Let's see what becomes of his fantasy dreams after he's dead and buried. Joseph's brethren plotting, mirroring the murderous plotting against Jesus of the Jewish elites. Verse 21, but Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, "Let us not kill him." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands, and bring him back to his father." It isn't surprising Reuben wasn't with the brothers in their initial plotting. I doubt that Reuben was in the good books with his brothers. Joseph was Daddy's big dreaming snitch, but Reuben had committed adultery with Bilhah. Imagine what Dan and Naphtali thought of Reuben for sleeping with their mother. What a messed up family. Yet Reuben, as the eldest, no older than 24 mind you, did have certain positional authority over his brothers. Reuben has enough sway to persuade them to halt their immediate murderous impulses. Reuben disgraced himself with Bilhah, but maybe he could partially restore his relationship with Jacob by delivering Joseph back to his father. Whatever Reuben's motives, at least he bought Joseph some time. Reuben, as the eldest, stands to lose the most with Joseph's survival. Clearly, Jacob is manoeuvring Joseph to be the privileged firstborn. Joseph is Jacob's substitute for Reuben. Reuben's actions here strongly hint at contrition for his Bilhah disgrace. Verse 23, so it came to pass when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic and the tunic of many colours that was on him. They couldn't wait to violently tear the tunic off Joseph. Consider the envy and hate festering in the hearts of the brothers. I can imagine their boastful, murderous big talk, their hatred-filled rants around evening campfires, outdoing each other as to what they'd do if they ever got their hands on Joseph in his fancy coat. Verse 24, then they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. Cast into a deep, dark, empty, waterless pit, almost as if he were dead and buried. I wonder how long they left him in the pit. The Bible doesn't say, but can I speculate the possibility of 3 days and 3 nights? Verse 25, and they sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry them down to Egypt. The fact they could have a meal after so violently treating their brother shows their callousness. Not the slightest hint of guilt for the evil way they treated their brother. Their hate has seared their conscience. They just sit down to satisfy their stomachs. It isn't revealed in this passage, perhaps so as to keep the similitude with Jesus, who opened not his mouth. But Genesis 42 reveals that Joseph at this point, with great anguish, had cried out and pleaded with his brothers for his life. will shortly discover Reuben is again separated from his brothers. He's not eating with them. So the brothers, without Reuben's involvement, see the Ishmaelite traders travelling south to Egypt. For context, the Ishmaelites were distant cousins to the sons of Jacob. It's very likely, near certain, they knew each other and had traded often. They were transporting their goods for sale to the profitable Egyptian markets. Verse 26. So Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood?" Hey bros, I know we've all fantasized about killing Joseph, but selling him into Egyptian slavery is as good as death. Plus, we can make some money in the process of betraying and finally getting rid of him. Were you aware the name Judah becomes Judas when you render it in Greek? That's right. The one who betrayed Jesus for silver was actually named Judah. Surprise, surprise. Here we have Judas or Judah in our Genesis 37 text proposing the sale of his brother for silver. Verse 27. Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brothers listened. Then Midianite traders passed by, so the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. Some Bible critics like to point out this text confuses and mixes Ishmaelites with Midianites. This is no mixing. This is no mistake. It reveals a clear alliance of the day. Ishmael and Midian were half-brothers, sons of Abraham. It makes perfect sense. Two small tribes would partner together. There's strength in numbers. They'd be silly not to team up. At this point in history, there was probably only 100 or so Midianites and 100 or so Ishmaelites. So it turns out the interchangeability of Ishmaelite for Midianite is a text confirming proof, not a sign of error. Verse 29. Then Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes. He returned to his brothers and said, "The lad is no more, and I, where shall I go?" So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the tunic in the blood. Then they sent the tunic of many colours, and they brought it to their father, and said, "We have found this. Do you know whether it's your son's tunic or not?" Reuben, having perhaps ruined his relationship with his brothers, had separated from them. The Bible gives no reason for the separation. I think it's reasonable to speculate Reuben was on the nose with his brothers. It's quite possible it's been several days since this unexplained separation. Dare I say, 3 days and 3 nights. Reuben is broken-hearted upon seeing the empty pit. His first thought was, they've killed him. He knew there was no chance they had a change of heart and released Joseph. No doubt the brothers explained to Reuben what they actually did with Joseph, though this explanation is missing from the text. Reuben's lamenting is telling. The lad is no more, and I, where shall I go? Reuben had already destroyed his relationship with his father. As the eldest, he would bear the guilt of Joseph's fate. Surely now Reuben would be expelled from Jacob's family. Due to the prior sin in Reuben's life, he feels as if he's no other choice than to participate in the brothers' disgraceful cover-up. And by agreeing to the cover-up, Reuben includes himself in the brothers' guilt of effectively killing off Joseph. Right here in the story arc, this is the climax of sin upon sin. The Cinerama chickens are about to come home to roost for 108-year-old Jacob. He's lied, deceived, conspired, heel-grabbed, usurped, tricked and outsmarted people his whole life. He's taught his sons for 24 years to get one over, trick, deceive, outwit, always win, plot, scheme and lie, whatever it takes. Having been well taught, they put together the cruelest of deceptions, which will plunge Jacob into deep, soul-crushing depression. Our sins have a way of finding us out. Eastern philosophies have ingrained themselves in Western minds. People talk about good and bad karma and believe it to be true. Karma is superstitious nonsense. But the Bible does reveal God will often return the evil committed by an individual upon their own head. This isn't karma. This is the judgment of God. God returning evil for evil. God's righteous retribution. In order to make the point clear, God will often see your own wicked actions returned upon your own head in judgment. 31 years earlier, Jacob had tricked his elderly father, using a slaughtered goat to make a stew and put skin on his arms and neck. He'd used the coat of his father's favoured son to fool and deceive his father for personal advancement. Now Jacob's own sons use a slaughtered goat and their father's favoured son's tunic for their own personal advancement. Jacob's 31 years earlier deception is horrifyingly mirrored and greatly intensified in this cold-blooded and wicked paternal deception. Verse 33, and he recognized it and said, "It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Without doubt, Joseph is torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters, confirming he had other daughters, arose to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted. And he said, "For I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Now the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Jacob was inconsolable, tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned Joseph's death. For so many days they lost count. Having lost the love of his life, Rachel, Jacob invested all his love in Joseph. I dare say, when Jacob looked into Joseph's eyes, he saw the eyes of Rachel. Jacob couldn't help himself but to overindulge and spoil his dear Joseph. And now his only hope for reunion with Joseph was the grave itself. Before closing today, I want to comment on the actions of his brothers. Their deception is as evil as it is brilliant. All 10 brothers played their part to perfection. They'll live with this stain on their character for the rest of their lives. They pulled off the lie as Jacob had, but will be racked with guilt for over 2 decades. Until, just like Jacob, they finally confront and admit their guilt with great fear before their wrong brother. And Joseph will quickly forgive them, just as Esau forgave Jacob. And Joseph will embrace and weep before his brothers, just as Esau had before Jacob at their unexpected 20-year reunion. Until our next study, may God richly bless you all.